and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for day 2 of the Agentic AI Summit. I'm Jennifer Chase, founding dean of the UC Berkeley College of Computing, Data Science and Society, or CDSS as we call it. It contains ECS and statistics and a few other computational domain departments. I'm a professor of ECS, statistics, math, and information. We conceived of CDSS as the platform both to advance the core of ECS and statistics and to connect them with other disciplines across campus, from letters and sciences to law, medicine and health, policy, and more. We were born at the perfect time, half a year after the release of ChatGPT. We are the first new college at Berkeley since the 1960s. So the AI transformation is the perfect time to have a new college. We see our college as the place to seize opportunities and mitigate potential harms of these powerful technologies, cognizant of the fact that we are only in the very, very early days. At the summit today, we'll discuss the latest research, diverse applications across industries, the opportunities, and the safety and security challenges inherent in AI systems. You likely know that much of the foundational AI underlying these recent leaps and bounds was done by Berkeley ECS faculty and students. Indeed, the faculty and students of our college, and that many of them are in leadership positions driving it forward. I would assume that we have a lot of alumni out in the audience here today. We've shown that bringing smart people, diverse talent, and expert perspectives together provides community and leads to more informed and responsible innovation. This summit provides an opportunity to build bridges across communities, catalyze meaningful conversations and partnerships, and collaborate in the transformation of the future. While AI developments are increasingly being done behind closed doors, I'm here to say that we need to maintain open doors and conversations among those developing and advancing this technology. We need open source models in order to bring the benefits of AI to all, not just the select few. As some of you probably know, Berkeley has been the home and leader in open source technology since the 1970s, and we're doubling down on open for the AI models. Not only open source, but also open weight and even open data when possible. We want to partner with the government, other academic institutions, nonprofits, and companies that are aligned. The only way that this country can maintain, and in fact, much of the world can maintain its lead in AI and the innovation economy is to grow our open weight AI models. At our college, Berkeley CDSS, in addition to building foundational AI systems that are open, we're focused on AI and security and safety, which many of you heard about yesterday, alternative AI models and architectures that will lower the energy consumption that we are seeing in our data centers. And we are focused on AI models where data is particularly sparse, including AI for science, and in fact, for most domains beyond language, images, and video. The next decade, we're going to see more advances with positive impacts for humanity in biomedicine and health, climate and sustainability, and other areas. Our college has created leading institutes in AI for medicine and health, for biomedicine, for materials, and more. At the same time, education is completely shifting in the age of AI, and Berkeley is at the forefront of this change. We're using AI to level the playing field for students coming into the university, and we are teaching our students how to work in human AI hybrid teams. As others mentioned yesterday, we believe that AI will lead to new kinds of jobs that will involve these hybrid teams working at the boundary of what is currently possible. We need the community gathered here to engage by advancing technology that amplifies our collective potential and actively empowers individuals and society. We're hosted by the UC Berkeley Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence, RDI, led by the amazing Dawn Sung. Dawn, thanks for gathering this group together today and for your important contributions in AI safety and agentic AI education. Let's welcome Dawn.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer, for a great introduction. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Really welcome, everyone, to the second day of our Agentic AI Summit. We are already excited about the fast advancement in frontier AI. And also, as Jennifer mentioned, now we're also seeing that the gap is narrowing between open weight models and proprietary models. And I want to share a little bit of the history of how all this got started and how we got here. So back in actually 2024, back then actually not many people were talking about agents, agentic AI. But however, at RDI, like we could see that the agents are the next frontier and the agents are the future. So in fall 2024, we launched the world's first course and the first MOOC, massive online course, on agentic AI. And then come year 2025, even though I knew that agents is the next frontier, agents is the future, but even I was surprised. Come around year 2025, it suddenly became the year of agents. And then we continue to see the fast growth in agentic AI. And last fall, 2025, we launched the first edition of Agentic AI Summit at UC Berkeley. And then together with the fast growth of agentic AI, we continue to lead the agentic AI MOOC with over 40,000 enrolled globally. And also come to this year, we are here for the second edition of Agentic AI Summit. And again, thanks everyone for being here. We are continuing to see the fast growth in agentic AI. And going forward, we foresee that the growth will be even further fueled by a number of factors. We are seeing unprecedented CapEx spending, and also we are seeing exponential growth in AI compute capacity. For example, global AI compute capacity is doubling every 7 months. And you can see for all the hyperscalers, their CapEx spending is also increasing drastically. And when we put all the CapEx spending by the hyperscaler together, it's reaching an unprecedented scale. It dwarfs all the largest CapEx spending in US history, the US mega projects. For example, dwarfs the Manhattan projects, the Marshall projects, and the Apollo program. And again, where will this lead us to? We foresee a further explosive growth of AI agents. And with that, on one hand, we want to benefit from the great capabilities and power of this agentic AI that can bring benefits and prosperity to all sectors of society. But on the other hand, we also need to pay attention to a broad spectrum of different types of AI risks. Here's just one example of some of our recent work, in particular in the space of cybersecurity. For example, CyberGym, our benchmark, which has been used by all frontier AI labs, is a leading benchmark that helps evaluate frontier AI capabilities in cybersecurity, in particular for vulnerability discovery and also for generating proof of concepts, POCs. These are inputs that actually triggers vulnerability. So when you look at the performance on CyberGym, it demonstrates the fast increase of frontier AI capabilities in cybersecurity. And also, it shows that frontier AI models, not only they can discover previously known vulnerabilities, but they can also discover 0 days new vulnerabilities in this large-scale, widely distributed open-source software. And also, recently, with Cloud Mythos and Project Glasswing, it further demonstrated the power and capabilities of frontier AI in cybersecurity capability. And also, in our most recent work, ExploitGym, it also demonstrated that frontier AI now, not only that they can discover vulnerabilities, discover previously unknown vulnerabilities, now also they have the capabilities to turn the discovered vulnerabilities into exploits automatically, and to actually enable, to generate exploits to actually take malicious actions. And furthermore, ExploitGym shows that the frontier AI now, not only that they can generate exploits, but also they can actually generate exploits that can bypass standard security mechanisms. And also, I think many of you have heard recently the OpenAI Hugging Face incident. In that incident, actually, OpenAI is evaluating their agents actually on our benchmark, ExploitGym. So the agents were trying to solve the tasks on ExploitGym. And unfortunately, in this case, the agents was able to break out the isolation environment and actually even hacked the Hugging Face hacked the Hugging Face infrastructure. To try to actually get information from Hugging Face to help the agents to solve tasks in ExploitGym. So all this illustrates that now frontier AI model and agents have really reached a level of capabilities that's so powerful that the agents can autonomously actually attack other well-protected infrastructure. And also this time, first it shows that evaluation infrastructure now is also part of the attack surface. And also the risk extends beyond the evaluation integrity, evaluation space. So all this leads to that now we are at a critical point. Frontier AI capabilities are advancing rapidly, as our work and others' work have shown. And also, more concerning, the pace of progress itself accelerating. And also, in addition, many researchers also consider that recursive self-improvements, RSI, plausible within the next few years, accelerating progress in a way that could further outpace our ability to understand and govern these systems. So the key question here is, how do we ensure that agentic AI becomes one of humanity's greatest advances while remaining safe, secure, and beneficial for everyone? And also, recently we have seen various open letters from Jensen, from Mark Zuckerberg, from Demis, and so on. And also there is the recent Pacing the Frontier open letter signed by over 1,000 leading AI researchers from Frontier AI Labs, including myself, and also open letter from leading economists as well. So all these are calling essentially we are at a critical point. We must act now, and there are important questions and also important questions to answer and important decisions to make. What's the best path for us to proceed? So this is also where Berkeley RDI stands and the mission for Berkeley RDI. So Berkeley RDI stands here to steward the future of safe, secure, beneficial agentic AI. And the mission for Berkeley RDI is to steward the future of agentic AI for human flourishing by advancing the science, engineering, and the open ecosystem needed to ensure it is safe, secure, and beneficial for everyone. So Berkeley Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence. So let me quickly decipher the 3 words. So responsible here means safe, secure, trustworthy. And decentralized represents open ecosystem, beneficial to everyone. And intelligence here, of course, is AI and agentic AI. So in order to achieve this goal, so Berkeley RDI is a campus-wide multidisciplinary innovation center. It's one of only a very few number of research centers that have been funded by the state of California. And encompasses faculty and students across campus from Berkeley, from CDSS, where Jennifer is a dean, and School of Engineering, has business school, and law school. And Berkeley RDI, as an innovation center, has a unique structure. We have 3 key pillars: research, education, community, and entrepreneurship. On the research front, we have 3 core commitments. First, we focus on building safe and secure foundations, develop science and engineering needed for building safe, secure, trustworthy agentic AI. Second, our core mission is to enable open ecosystem to advance open frameworks, interoperable protocols, and decentralized infrastructure, so innovation and opportunities are broadly shared. And the third one is guiding by measuring what matters the most, to create rigorous benchmarks, evaluations, and scientific methods to measure capabilities, risks, and societal impact to help build the evidence base and guide the future of agentic AI. So with that, here are some quick examples of some of the works that have been done in Berkeley RDI. For building safe and secure foundations, the researchers in RDI have built advanced automated red teaming and defenses for safe and secure agentic AI, developing broad spectrum of different technologies and solutions, and the work has won many Best Paper awards in top conferences and so on. And also, for enabling a future where frontier AI helps defenders, modern attackers, to build a secure foundation. Another example thrust the center has been focused on is on building verifiable code generation so that we can ensure that the AI-generated code is secure. For guiding by measuring what matters most, as some of you may have seen, the benchmarks, for example, have been developed and led by Berkeley RDI, including CyberGym, ExploitGym, CyberGym end-to-end. Many of these have been used by essentially our frontier labs as a leading benchmark for measuring frontier AI in cybersecurity. And also, we have launched the Frontier AI Cybersecurity Observatory to help bring the community together to continue monitor the fast progress of frontier AI in cyber capabilities. And also, recently, we launched the Agents Last Exam, a new benchmark aims at evaluating agents' performance on real-world, economically valuable, long-horizon, challenging tasks across a broad spectrum of 55 different industry sectors, covering over 90% of all digital domains. And we welcome you to contribute further into this benchmark as well. And also, we recently launched the Agent Beats, a new open framework for standardized, reproducible agent evaluation where we're actually agentifying the agent evaluation itself as well. This is also in collaboration with many other institutions, and we welcome everyone to participate here as well. And also, Berkeley IDI has led an effort on advancing science and evidence-based AI policy so that we can actually build the evidence base to help guide, provide needed information for AI policy, and as I mentioned, guide the future of AI and agentic AI. And the work has also served as a base for the report to California Governor Newsom and other legislation as well. And so that's on the research side. On the education side, Berkeley IDI has led a number of massive open online courses, including the first MOOC on agentic AI, with over 40,000 enrolled globally, and 14,000 on the Discord. And the Berkeley IDI YouTube channel has over 1 million views. And also, Berkeley IDI has organized global competitions and hackathons with participants from over 1,000 universities and colleges and over 1,000 companies as well. And the hackathon competition together have had over around $2 million in prizes and resources. And finally, for the entrepreneurship and community pillar, Berkeley IDI also hosts the Berkeley Accelerator, which is the world's leading university-led accelerator. And in the past, it has had 7 cohorts with 110 global teams, with follow-on funding raised over $650 million. And today, on this stage at 3:50 p.m., you can also watch the Startup Spotlight, featuring this cohort, the spring cohort from the Berkeley Accelerator teams. So with all these, putting the 3 pillars together, we hope that at Berkeley IDI, as an innovation center, as I mentioned, we can steward the safe, secure, beneficial future for agentic AI that also enables human flourishing. So this is also why we are convening the summit here. As I mentioned, now we are at a critical point. We hope that this summit can also help gather the community together, share knowledge, build open ecosystem, and together we steward the future of safe, secure, and beneficial agentic AI. So with that, I welcome everyone at the summit. We hope also you can help spread the word. Please do help join the social media, tweet and post about the summit. And also this summit is also a much larger scale than last year as well. We received close to 1,000 submissions for speaking proposals and papers. And we have over 1,500 different industry organizations represented here and over 250 different universities represented here with close to 5,000 in-person attendees. And with that, I want to welcome everyone to the summit. Please do enjoy. We have 4 different stages and also a lounge for attendees at the Alumni House. And a huge thanks to our sponsors and our community partners. So with that, I want to thank everyone and welcome everyone. So please also help retweet and repost our tweet and LinkedIn posts as well. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Aaron Jacobson. I'm a partner at NEA, global venture capital firm, where I focus on investing across AI infrastructure, cybersecurity, and developer tooling. It's always very exciting to come back to Cal and to participate in events, as my firm NEA has been a longtime supporter of the Cal community, having backed over a dozen founders coming out of Cal, including companies like Databricks and Perplexity from the earliest stages. So we're super grateful for the innovation coming out of this university. Today, I'm privileged to serve as a session chair for us to dive into the state of enterprise AI. We're going to have a few different speakers present on a few topics about enterprise AI. And after that, we're going to dive into a panel where we will welcome 2 additional speakers to join us. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Rao Panani. Rao leads a diverse portfolio in Google Cloud, from agent governance, specialized models, to driving deployment of Gemini Enterprise for all of Alphabet. His mantra is better governance unlocks more agent autonomy. He is recognized as a pioneer in agent identity in Okta 2026 Identity 25. He's a co-creator of A2A, AP2, contributor to UCP, ARD, and he drives interoperability standards for the benefit of enterprise customers. So with that, I'd like to welcome Rao to the stage.
Sure. Good morning, folks. Governance, super exciting topic. Yeah? So today, I'd like to share what am I seeing in enterprise adoption, what is the friction, the overall framing of how we should think about when we get into how do I accelerate the adoption within an enterprise. And I'll give a sneak peek at some of the solutions that we have put in place already. We've all seen technology evolve and various inflection points. How many of you still remember mobile devices were not allowed into the enterprise? You could not bring your own device into the enterprise and connect it to your enterprise systems. Right? So think of what it took to get over that hump, and we are an even bigger question mark at this point in AI. But there are already implementations and solutions on the way that will make it possible to deploy agents with autonomy in your production environment in an enterprise. As you look at these technologies, there's a lot of airtime spent on what's the technology, what am I doing here with this technology, and what will it disrupt. Then comes the wave of what can I actually build with it? How can I make use of it? The productization part of it. But then most people don't think about what happens on a day 2 once I deploy. How do I operate it? How do I manage this solution? Right? So finding that sweet spot across all of these, the technology, the product, and operations, is how you'll increase adoption of the technology. What am I seeing in the enterprise today? Technology moves at a rapid pace, but the organizations adopt it and move slowly because you're dealing with people, existing processes, and then the products themselves as they're maturing through this cycle. Few years ago, let's just say 3-4 years ago, enterprise customers used to talk about, prove to me that AI works. Like, does it really deliver what it needs to deliver? And then very quickly, it turned into, OK, help me understand how to use it and how to build a product with this. And now, as I'm talking to customers and senior leaders, it's really about help me manage the scale. I know I'm going to deploy it, and I'm going to deploy it at scale. How do I actually manage it in my operations? What I'm seeing is really in an enterprise today, the 2 bookends of adoption. There are products out there that help you with individual productivity. I find the information quickly. I can take actions on it for my own personal use, be it on the personal side or on the enterprise side. And then on the other extreme, you have very high code agents that are built by the CIO organization, CTO organization, that are tested, going through the proper eval cycles, security scans, everything, and then they're deploying it for their organizational use. That's great, right? So you're seeing the employee productivity driven by personal productivity, and you're seeing the organization driving new investments so that they're actually able to leverage AI for the benefit of the organization. There's a wide swath of middle where we are yet to unlock for a variety of reasons. So I'll touch on some of those and what's happening. As we look ahead, what are we aiming for? Right? So this is one framing I use as we build products, as we build experiences. Consider an agent as an intern. They come into your organization. You trust them with a few things, not all of them. You don't give them full access. But at the same time, you do expect them to do certain things. At the end of the day, a great intern would tell you what they delivered, what they needed help with. That's essentially your human in the loop. And what they could not solve. That's your error analysis. Right? So, and then on the other side, the people that are managing either the interns or the agents they need to have the ability to give feedback, help the intern, or in this case the agent, improve on the things that it required human in the loop. Every human in the loop interaction is an opportunity to tap into that residual knowledge and improve the automation for the next cycle. So, and then similar thing on the error analysis. Where did it fail and how can I improve it for the next cycle? So you can imagine the evolution of as agents come in, going that expertise very rapidly if you have built in those feedback loops within your organization. If you take a step further, we are envisioning the state, and it's already happening, where every task, every employee has an army of agents, whether it's my personal agent or an agent that is just out there doing the task that I would otherwise do, or maybe when I need to ask my specialist coworker, there is an agent that is kind of solving some of those tasks. To get there, we do need to solve certain governance layers. I talked about the bookends of personal agent and the deeper workflow agents. These work today very well because when a user is interacting with these agents, it's really taking on the user's identity. Agent is acting on behalf of the user. Your enterprise is already set up to solve for those. A user identity kind of permeates through, and it is wired into everything that you can access. You can access a certain system, you cannot access a certain system. So when an agent accesses that data, underlying data, it's already using the user's identity, and it either gets it or does not get it. So that's relatively straightforward, and that's already in place. But now the challenge is, I build an agent. I share it with my colleague. If I'm accessing certain data that I have access to, but my colleague does not, how do we handle that? It's easy to say, just deny the access, and then you kind of have a broken agent that my colleague cannot actually use. Right? Even difficult or tricky situation is, I have lower access, but my colleague has higher access. What if I give him an agent to update the salary information? Right? So what if he has the additional access and then he can actually update? Right? So you want to work through all of those security scenarios on when agency difference happens when you're sharing these agents. On the other side, when multiple agents are deployed across different departments, we have a contract generating agent that looks at the pricing schemes, what the customer is eligible for, what discounts they're eligible for, and then generates that. And then you have a sales team that is looking at an account, interacting with end customer. It'll be great if these two agents can orchestrate and generate the perfect contract so that there is fewer handoffs between humans in the organizational chain. So when you're going into these multi-agent orchestration scenarios across silos, what data gets exposed, what functionality gets exposed, and what do you allow each others to do, that's where some of these challenges come into play, and we are actively solving those. Now, so I touched on a few of these things. I'll distill that to going from what is happening in the enterprise today to what are the true distilled requirements around governance. We are already seeing an enterprise is dealing with multiple large language models in their deployments. And different agents do different things, different functionality, and they use different LLMs. And then under the covers, you have a variety of MCPs, API endpoints, and the CLIs. How do I manage and handle all of this in a consistent and uniform way? It comes down to visibility, control, and security. These are the questions the CIOs and the chief security officers are asking. How do I see what's happening? Do I have visibility to everything that's going on? I spent a lot of time solving for shadow IT. Now, essentially, this is shadow AI. How do I know an employee is not simply downloading a skill that they like on the internet and then using it internally? And what is it accessing? So those are the questions that we're trying to solve. And then on the control, how can I actually manage it? How can I restrict to least agency? I can allow an agent to check my vacation balance. I can maybe even accept the risk that I can update the vacation balance, but I don't want to allow an autonomous agent to update the salary information. So understanding the task and understanding the data restrictions, and then how do I actually manage that with fine-grained control? These are things that customers are asking us. The next thing is security. how can I be proactive at reducing this risk? Can I detect malicious activity? Yes, it need not be a agent that went rogue. It used to be the case when something went wrong, people would blame it on an intern. Now people blame it on an agent. Yeah? But ultimately, who is actually accountable for it? So there's always these norms in an organization where you do bad stuff, you get fired. But with an agent, can you fire an agent? Like, who's actually accountable for it in an organization? And so it is these understanding the existing process and building both the technology, the process, and the people mindset into delivering these agents to fully unlock their autonomy is what we're trying to solve for. Okay? So that's the setup of the problem statement. How are we at Google Cloud thinking about it? So I'll start with a few things. At a big picture level, we have a Gemini Enterprise agent platform where you can build low-code, no-code agents. Governance is a huge foundation building block for us. We have a heavy investment across a variety of those building blocks. We look at these as a composable building blocks that need to come together to deliver governance for an enterprise. A lot of these elements do translate into a consumer and the Internet of the agents too, but I'm going to talk more about what I'm seeing in the enterprise side. Everything starts with identity. So I talked about a user identity being your control point. In the new world, we are minting agent identity. So every agent that is operating in an enterprise has its own identity. What that means is your existing enterprise processes on identity and access management, IAM process, they work seamlessly with the agent. You can now identify an agent. You can pull a kill switch if you need to. You manage access controls through your existing IAM solutions. So having an identity for an agent, explicit identity, helps you seamlessly fit into current process. Now from there, you want to be able to register every agent. Just like every employee has an ID in your LDAP directory. That enables you to understand what controls they have, what accesses they have, and what permissions they have. Obviously, you want to be able to observe the agent, not just statically when it is minted, but also when it is in runtime. Now, once you have that, you can expose that agent through your front end. I make it accessible through a variety of surfaces, whether it's your GChat, Slack, any of these interfaces. And on the back end, it can connect it to any of your data sources. Again, it's about the identity, having the ability to access those data sources. The new things, it is not just static. Just like a user, once they onboard into an organization, you generally have their set permissions. Whereas here, you're trying to unlock the difference between context-aware, task-aware permissions. The example I used earlier, which is about checking my vacation balance, is very different from doing a write operation on my salary database. So you want the ability to monitor for what is the actual task that is happening now, and have the ability to do runtime permission checking when the task is being accomplished. So we have an agent gateway that does that, coupled with IAM, identity, and access authorization through that process. So that's our overall stack. Again, I can go into a lot of details on each of the components. I'll skip through these things. So maybe I'll touch on some of these things. So as you work at scale on these things, it cannot be a static configuration for you set it once and forget. You have to have this ongoing runtime monitoring, both live as well as audit post hoc. So we have the technology called Model Armor that is actually doing non-deterministic analysis of enterprise policies. You have the IAM policies that are set once, but then you have the content policies which says check for prompt injection, verify for any PII leakage, and what is being exfilled out of the model or your data. And as the runtime is happening, you also want some offline checks to see where is this some anomaly activity going on. Okay. A lot of it rides on observability. Observability evaluates whether you can do it live or offline, so you need to be able to do these things. And lastly, the existing mechanisms of API security plays a huge role. A lot of companies, and almost every company, has already solved this problem at the API layer. When they went from internal databases to enabling a mobile device or enabling a consumer-facing app, they already solved by tying an identity into what data is available to this user. So we use those underlying primitives of API layer, solution layer, and the content layer security checks to solve for this for different scenarios. To net it out, use your existing infrastructure, but there are some special sauce on top of that you need to incorporate to drive agentic solutions. And with that, I'll say investing in governance will actually help you accelerate as you go through this agentic journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Rao. For our next speaker, I'd like to welcome Adarsh Hiramath to the stage. Adarth is the founder and co-CEO of Mercor. He started Mercor in January 2023, and he dropped out of Harvard to pursue the company. They started selling data to the AI labs to improve model capabilities, but in 2026, they built an offering for enterprises looking to deploy AI. Recently, Mercor hit a $2 billion revenue run rate, and it achieved a $20 billion valuation. Join me in welcoming Adarsh to the stage.
First of all, thank you for having me. Figured I should start off with a little bit of an introduction about the company and myself. I'm Adarsh. I'm the founder and co-CEO of Mercor. I started the company when I was 19 in college, in my second year of Harvard. I started it with my co-founders, who I met in high school. We were all on the debate team together, so one of my co-founders was actually my debate partner back in the day, and the other was on the debate team as well. So, we started off by working with a lot of the AI labs in selling data to make models better. And the core driving thing here was just the realization that the models had gotten sophisticated enough that it wasn't just about, annotating an image and seeing if there's a stop sign in it. It's like, can we make the model better at engineering? Can we make the model better at medical tasks? Can we make the model better at legal? And that requires really, really sophisticated human expertise, and then also the capabilities to structure the data in the right way for the agentic paradigm in RL environments and gyms. But that said, in 2026, the main focus area for Mercor, which not a lot of people know about, is enterprise. What we've seen is that the first kind of level is the labs and making the models better. Then you have all of these neo labs, and then you have applied layer companies and startups like Harvey and Cursor. But then you have your average enterprise, and all four of those companies really, really want to own their own intelligence, apply it throughout the company, train their own models, and they need the fundamentally same offering in both training and evals. So that's a little bit of context about the company and what we're prioritizing today. The thing that we're seeing is that there's a huge, huge shift in every company wanting to own its own intelligence, as I was mentioning earlier. So there are several ways to own your own intelligence. The first one is obviously training your own model. A great example of this is Cursor, which trained their own composer model in collaboration with SpaceX, which is now a really, really good coding model. And they're able to fine-tune this model with all of the Cursor data and infrastructure. The second one is adopting your own frontier model and then engineering a harness that's really, really good for the product or the use case. A bunch of companies are doing this. But the common thread across both of these is you need a really, really good eval. And that's where Mercor comes in helping with creating these evals, and it builds upon a lot of our work that we do with the labs and our frontier benchmarks like Apex. One of the main issues that we've seen is that most of these enterprise AI use cases never reach production, whether you're training your own model for an external agent, you're deploying agents inside the company, and that's just because there's no way to actually measure ground truth or success. So the typical guessing game or loop is you actually don't have a way to systematically identify agent opportunities in your product, so you sort of guess where to start. Then you speculate on the agent behavior, and then you deploy the agent, and then maybe you'll try it in like a sandbox or something like that, and then assume it kind of works. And then you improve it based on failures that are largely observed or anecdotal or something like that. And this loop is really, really bad, which is why we believe in an eval-driven approach for enterprise AI deployments. So what is an eval? It's like a pretty overloaded term. So what I wanted to do is build upon the definition of eval and what that means for the enterprise context from Apex, where what we do, and we spend a lot of time thinking about with the labs, is figuring out where models are not performing as well as they should be, and then providing the right suggestions to improve model capability. So, a common example would be when we're working with the labs, a frontier model is coming out, and we'll benchmark that model across a bunch of different tasks, across a bunch of different domains. And typically for the agentic use cases, the models will be doing work over many hundreds and hundreds of different turns, and we'll be able to analyze the trajectory, figure out where the model is failing and why. Turns out you can also do that for a lot of enterprise AI use cases as well, where fundamentally what you need is a task. What is the model actually doing? Then the second thing is you need the trajectory, which is what is the reasoning and rationale that the agent is using. The third is the actual artifact that it's producing. Fourth is the actual world. What is the context that that agent is traversing? And then the last thing is a rubric or a verifier. So we have this for a lot of the foundation model lab evaluation. You should check out Apex, our frontier benchmark, which has a bunch of different domains and this exact structure. But it also turns out this is really, really useful if you're deploying AI in any high-stakes context, because you have full observability over what the agent is doing and why it's failing and so on and so forth. So an example, one of these evals would be this, which is a real investment banking task, right? So a banker might prompt the model to say, update this merger thing to show how a deal affects both companies. And then if you're doing the work manually, you might just go into an Excel, you might look at a specific merger model, you might go into a data room, you might get some feedback or get something wrong and then look it up and then go produce the actual model. It turns out you need observability over all of those things if you're deploying an agent to do that, right? So in this case, a good agentic eval would be the actual task, which is updating the merger model. The trajectory, which is all the different tools the agent is calling, found the merger model, updated the deal terms, build these tables, all of this sort of stuff. The actual result, which is the merger model in a spreadsheet with the right citations. And then you have the verifier, which is where you can grade a lot of the responses. What is the output? And does it meet subjective criteria, maybe stylistic guidelines? And does it meet objective criteria, which is this thing actually correct? And one thing that we believe, which is pretty core to our business, is that human intelligence is really, really important for that grading step and that eval step. So a little bit more about what we do with enterprises and the problems that we're trying to solve. It's pretty interesting. So the first thing that we realized in a lot of the building of the evals is evals are in a large part are the bottleneck to successfully deploying agents in a company, and also allow you to just diagnose what are the agent opportunities. Like if you build an eval for every single one of your departments and a proper mapping of these tasks and what ground truth looks like in the rubric, it's very, very logical that you could come up with like the top 5 areas in your company where you should deploy agents. So we were able to actually find where agents create value systematically and quantitatively with evals. Then secondly is we're actually able to deploy agents and teach what good looks like in a company and actually automate a lot of those processes. The third thing is it turns out that evals are really, really the foundation for continuous learning and improvement. Like when you have an agent that fails on an eval, then you can triage up the reason it failed out to the skills file and make sure it never happens again. And then you can even post-train a model based on those failures and make sure that it never regresses. And the last thing, which is an effort that we're working on with a bunch of leading companies, is data monetization, where the labs really, really want to make sure that the models are good in these real enterprise use cases. And that scaffolding that I described, the task, the trajectory, the context, the artifact, the rubric, all of that together is really, really valuable data for model training at the foundation model level. So that's a little bit more about what we're doing in enterprises and why we think evals are really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Adarsh. So for our third and last speaker before we jump into the panel, I'd like to welcome Duncan Lennox to the stage. Duncan is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at HubSpot, where he leads product, engineering, design, and security for the company. Prior to HubSpot, Duncan held multiple GM roles at AWS and Google, most recently as GM of Applied AI for Google Cloud, where he developed conversational and enterprise agents across a variety of industries, including customer support, financial services, healthcare, and automotive. Prior to his last decade working at hyperscalers, he previously built and ran 2 enterprise SaaS startups. Join me in welcoming Duncan to the stage.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you all. I'd like to take you on a little bit of a journey that we've been on at HubSpot over the last 3 years or so, leveraging AI not only in what we build for our customers, but also how we built it. We've hit a few walls along the way, learned some lessons, and I'd like to kind of share those with you. Firstly, to give you a little bit of context, if you don't know a lot about HubSpot, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary last month, and we build a go-to-market platform for largely small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises. And that means we're building software that helps marketing, sales, and service teams across that full go-to-market journey as they bring their products and services to their customers. And we have over 300,000 businesses today that depend on HubSpot for their go-to-market journey in about 140 countries across dozens of industries. And that means we get a view into what's going on across a wide variety of companies of different scales and in different regions. Okay, so with that, what do we hear back mostly from customers today? It's the word actually inserted into this question that's been around for the last couple of years. How do I actually transform with AI? Not just run pilots, not just play around with it, but actually deliver real value at scale for the company. And what we found over the last 3+ years on the journey we've been on is that the tools themselves and tool chains are just a starting point. They're not enough. And how you approach it makes a big difference. And one of the big, somewhat unexpected learnings for us over the whole process is we were focusing on initially, how do we build differently with AI? And it turns out a lot of those learnings apply to what we need to build for our customers and how we need to meet them on their journey. So what happened is we started back in 2023 or so with the early stage co-pilots. We'd moved beyond code assist into the early stage co-pilots. But what we found was those systems off the shelf couldn't work at our scale. So we were doing about, at the time, about 1 million builds a day across over 10,000 microservices. It's more now. And we were just running into walls. And a lot of it was around the models being very good at understanding coding problems generally, but not understanding enough about our business and how we work. And we had to address that. We could wait for companies to catch up, the tooling companies to catch up, or we could dive in and try and solve the problem ourselves, and that's what we chose to do. And there's really 3 learnings that came out of that I want to share with you today. And they're around flexible infrastructure, complete and trustworthy context, and then the notion of meeting customers where they are. So let's dive into the first one, flexible infrastructure. So we started out with these co-pilots, as I mentioned, and what we found pretty quickly is they didn't understand nearly enough about our tools and tool chain. We had over a decade of building our own custom tools and tool chains, and of course models are trained on data that's out there in the world and didn't have any access to how our particular tools worked. So unsurprisingly, they struggled a little bit with that. So what we did there was we built a bunch of MCP integrations in the very early days of MCP that allowed us to bring more knowledge about how our environment worked directly into the co-pilots themselves. We also pretty early on built what we would now call an agent execution platform or an agent harness. We actually built a containerized approach that made it very easy for us to spin up sandboxes where test loops could run in an entirely automated way without any human intervention. And that made it very lightweight for our engineers and very safe and secure from a reliability and security point of view as well. And overall, through this whole process, one of the things we didn't do was mandate engineers that they had to use AI in how they built. We really wanted to take engineers on the journey, show them how different and powerful an experience it is, and have them adopt them themselves. And it turned out one of the big blockers to that was engineers were very concerned about reliability. We put a lot of time and energy into building an incredibly reliable platform because it's mission critical for the go-to-market teams in our customers. And engineers were concerned it was going to introduce reliability issues. So we brought data. We looked at what was happening with some of the early areas where copilots and beyond were being used, and we were able to show our own engineers that there was not an impact on reliability, that reliability remained neutral despite the addition of code generation coming from these other platforms. And in fact, skipping ahead for a moment today, where we are today is reliability is actually increasing with the result of agentic coding and how we do it today. And those early wins got us to about 80% adoption, which is pretty good. This is 3 years ago, across our thousands of engineers, and about a 51% improvement overall in productivity and velocity. That's a composite metric measured from a variety of different things because we don't like to over-rotate on a single metric like PRs or lines of code. But we knew we could do more, and of course, the technology was advancing as well. So when we started building this infrastructure, as I mentioned, one of the interesting things is we started to learn that it actually had a big impact or potential impact on how we build for our customers as well. So one of the lessons that we're able to bring to customers is you really can't depend on a single vendor or model family for everything. Not only are the models obviously changing and improving all the time, it's a little bit of a horse race, but they're jagged in different areas. And when you apply them into very specific areas, as we do with go-to-market, we find that different models, model sizes, vendors are better, right tool for the right job. So we were pretty early to this notion of we need a way to run evals, to do A/B tests against model sizes, and it's not as simple as quality or evals overall. We think in terms of a mix of three things: quality, latency, and cost, in that order of priority, and solving for that. Because every individual task within the hundreds of go-to-market tasks that we build agents for today actually has a different value proposition around those three. Some are low stakes, where the quality bar does not have to be quite as high, even though it's still high. But it's a bulk process, and cost optimization is super important even early on. And then there's other tasks that are very high stakes, particularly when the HubSpot platform is going to do something that interacts with one of our customers, for example. So that was one. And so we built this abstraction layer. Again, today what we would call an agent harness, and it's a lot more sophisticated in 2026 than it was in 2023. But that allows us to very easily, under the hood, swap out models, do those evals, do those regression tests and comparisons against them. And that's proved to be incredibly powerful. And we built that abstraction layer in a way that frees feature teams up from having to be involved in any of the plumbing that goes on underneath to support that. They can create their evals, they can run them against a variety of models, swap models in and out with no regressions, without having to be involved in any of that. And that's turned out to be a huge advantage for us in building for our customers and then delivering what they need. Okay, so at the end of the day, that's really all about the shared foundation. Do that first, not last. I say that because often when you're trying to get going and you think about lean or you think about getting to MVP, there's a temptation to use a single stack for everything. What we found is that is a little bit counterintuitive to that energy put in up front around things like harnesses that gives you much more control over your own destiny, your ability to do these evals and swap models in and out, to be able to make changes to how an agentic loop runs, is incredibly powerful, and it's worth doing that early on. And of course, today, it's a lot easier to do that. There's a lot of phenomenal solutions out there. Companies like Fireworks are doing amazing work in this space. That's number one. Okay, number two, let's talk about context. And we very deliberately talk about the comprehensive nature of it and the trustworthy nature of it. So when we were building initially, and we moved on to autonomous coding agents, the agents needed to understand, of course, our code base, our conventions, and the environment. And we had all of this tooling that we'd been building over the last decade as well, and we had to get beyond even MCP here, allowing the coding agents to be able to understand everything about how our build chain worked. And a lot of the time and energy that we had to put in there to get much more effectiveness out of even frontier models was backfilling all of that context and bringing it to bear. And getting context right is hard. It's not a matter of just hitting a context window limit or dealing with context drift. It's also the fact that there's effectively an overfitting problem, that if you just throw too much context and the quality of it isn't good, the specificity of it is not good for the task at hand, you get poor results out of it. So getting that right turned out to be a skill that it was worth building and a platform capability that was very valuable to us. And adding that into how we built internally actually got us to 96% of engineers using AI. And this would be early 2025. And we were at a 60% improvement in velocity. So both numbers up a little bit from where they were. And then when we looked at how we would apply this to our customers, well, it turns out across the go-to-market journey, there's a lot of different things that you need to do and a lot of different agents, whether it's a prospecting agent or a customer support agent, and being able to deliver the right context at the right time allows you to drive significantly better outcomes in terms of quality, performance, and cost. So it was critical there. And we saw dramatic changes. For example, an agent that builds an outreach email as a follow-up to a sales demo went in about 6 months from a sales rep needing to edit it about 2/3 of the time to make some changes, to make it in their voice or to correct something, to them sending it without any edits 2/3 of the time. So AI knows a lot about the world, but you need a platform that knows your world at the end of the day, your business. And most of that data is data that exists only inside of your business and not out in the world and therefore in the models. And the last thing is meet customers where they are. This was really all about how we actually took that shared platform. Internally, that meant taking shared tools, shared primitives, building on the shared platform. Every agent anybody builds makes all agents better because it contributes to the overall context and the actual agent platform itself. And what that allowed us to do was get to essentially today 100% of engineers using agentic coding to build at HubSpot. And to give you some other metrics, 73% increase in lines of code and a 90% reduction in the time to first feedback on PRs. So that velocity was rising even as the quality was rising. And as I mentioned, reliability actually went up as well for customers through all of that. So at the end of the day, we also then realized that we needed to go and meet customers where they are with all of this technology. So as a SaaS vendor, historically, you'd thought about how do you keep customers inside of our UI? But we actually let go of that entirely and realized at the end of the day, the value we needed to deliver for customers was how do we make this intelligence that we build indispensable wherever they work, so deeply integrating into Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT so the customers get the full power of our agent platform and our context right there inside of wherever they might be working. Of course, many customers still choose to use the web or mobile UIs, or they use our own Breeze Assistant as well. But we have full parity across those for customers, and that turned out to be a huge win for our customers and for us. So at the end of the day, it's all about getting the foundation right. And what we found is if you don't get those foundational pieces right, it does start to plateau out. But once you start getting them in place, you get this incredibly powerful compound interest that starts to deliver incredible value, not only for how our teams build, but then also for what we're able to deliver to our customers. Thanks so much.
Okay. Excited to jump into my favorite part of this session, where we're going to dive into enterprise AI and get some questions answered by each of our speakers and panelists. Hopefully, if your coffee hasn't already woken you up, we will get some hot takes, and those will get you started this morning. Before I do, though, I want to welcome 2 additional panelists who are joining us. We have Anahita Tavisi, who currently serves as Snowflake's Chief Data and AI Officer, bringing a powerful blend of technical expertise and strategic vision to her role. Her team shapes how Snowflake builds, sells, and operates by designing the intelligence layer of the enterprise and acts as the customer zero for Snowflake's own products. Anahita brings more than 20 years of experience leading data teams and driving business growth across companies, including Instacart, Google, YouTube, and eBay. And our last panelist who's joining us is Surajit Chatterjee. Surajit is the founder and the CEO of Emma, a Mountain View, California-based agentic AI startup building AI employees for HR, IT, and finance functions for the Fortune 2000. He was previously Chief Product Officer at Coinbase, leading it through its 2021 IPO, and VP of Product for Google Mobile Ads and Google Shopping. All right, so why don't we dive in? We can't start talking about enterprise AI unless we really set what the landscape is, and each of you have a very unique perspective given the businesses that you're running. Just to start, I would love to really understand what is the state of enterprise AI. If you believe Gartner, Gartner says less than 10% of businesses have agentic AI deployed today, and by 2030, that'll be over 80%. Based off of your perch, looking to the enterprise, do you agree with that? Do you think it's less? Does it match up with what you're seeing? And what you're seeing work for what you're seing enterprises do with AI? Why don't we start with Duncan?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it sounds rough and tumble right to me. It feels like in the last year or two, I think a lot of enterprises have done a lot of pilots, done a lot of experimentation, maybe have 1 or 2 agents in production, but have struggled a little bit with how do we scale that out and up, like breadth and depth. And I think a lot of that speaks to you need a lot more than just a really good model to do that. A lot of the things that like the last 3 of us have all touched on different areas of it. So, but I have a lot of optimism that we are really figuring those things out right now, and you can feel that acceleration starting to take off. So 80% in 2030 doesn't seem unachievable to me.
How about you?
Yeah, mine is probably a little bit self-selected cohort that I talk to. So I'm definitely seeing a lot of adoption, especially when the organizations have figured out their data governance and security posture, they're able to move faster. So I talk to a lot of those customers, learn from them, and then help the customers who are figuring it out. They could be figuring it out on how to train the people to use this, or how to train their internal compliance teams on where they can accept risk and where they want to move forward faster. So for me, from my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of adoption. Use cases vary. So depending on the risk acceptance and tolerance level, I'm seeing good amount of adoption.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say we're seeing a lot of customers at different parts of the adoption curve, but broadly speaking, I'd say 2025 maybe was the year of experimentation, still trying to figure out whether these things work, how much is the hallucination rate, what is it that you're getting in terms of accuracy, can you really trust the outcome. 2026 has been more the year of really proving ROI and seeing that AI actually is driving ROI at scale. And then as we are going towards the rest of the year, I see more and more really using AI for true business transformation. So I'd say broadly, I agree with the direction, though I would say the exact percentage isn't really, I think, relevant, whether it's 70% or 90%. I don't think the number of agents is really the right metric to look at, but really, like, what's the true business value that you're ultimately getting from using these agentic AI solutions? And more and more, we are seeing customers, as you mentioned, with the right data foundation, with the right security and governance in place to get into that direction.
Adarsh?
Yeah, I would say that I think so far, enterprise AI adoption has been underwhelming, but that trend will change very, very quickly, and we're already seeing it in 2026. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is largely a willingness thing, which is that for the past 10 years, automation and business transformation has just been pitched in different forms, everything from BPO, task mining, process mining. So there's just a long, there's like a big graveyard of failed pilots and initiatives there. So I've noticed that a lot of enterprise executives are a little bit hesitant about AI transformation because it's one of those things, at least initially. And then the second thing is just a capability problem where the models just weren't good enough until very recently. I think the big shift is towards the agentic paradigm where it's no longer models for chat use cases, it's models for essentially being a coworker, which means managing many different stakeholders, data sources, and delivering economically valuable work output versus being a personal assistant. So I'm optimistic about that 10% number or whatever number going up very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are kind of two things. First, the definition of adoption itself. I think there's a lot of token maxing, a lot of people using AI as personal agents, as Rao was talking about. I don't quite think, that should be considered the enterprise adoption because a lot of those projects are failing or low ROI. But if you look deeply at true kind of workflow end-to-end automation, I think the 10% number is probably right, but it's growing fast, much faster than I would have expected. In fact, in Fortune 2000, there is a real appetite now to go and kind of agentically transform their businesses. So that's the first thing. I'm actually more optimistic. I think we may hit that 80% number even earlier than 2030. The second point is, It's not where the adoption actually stops. It's not so much technical anymore. It was technical, I think, last year, a few years back. It's 70% reason is organizational. It's the change management, it's security, infosec, fear of unknown, and so on. So I think if we can kind of cross that chasm of organizational resistance, so to say, we'll see faster adoption.
So Sergey, you make an interesting point. What does adoption mean? I think the other big question I have in AI is what does success look like? I mean, Anahita, you talked about ROI. I mean, when you're out there talking to enterprises, how are they measuring ROI? What's interesting to customers? Are they looking for additional revenue? Are they looking for cost savings? Is this really a question of employee productivity? Where do you think the most interesting value that's going to be created for AI is today that's resonating with enterprises?
I mean, ultimately, when we talk about ROI, we always say there are two ways that you deliver ROI. Either you help customers make more money or spend less money, right? So you want to either increase productivity or help them deliver additional revenue. It is extremely difficult to get to that bottom line measurement. So companies are using a variety of metrics.
All right, let's try. We'll try going to a different analyst then, until we can get Anahita's mic working again. So Duncan, maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you all measure ROI and success within HubSpot, and how are you sharing that with enterprises that you're bringing AI to?
We try to really stay focused on, here comes the new boss, same as the old boss, which is outcomes. At the end of the day, really understanding specifically what are the business outcomes we're trying to drive. Like we can look across, say, the go-to-market journey and identify whether it is, a new qualified lead into the top of the funnel, it is a closed won deal, it is a customer support ticket resolved successfully for the customer. And that brings a level of clarity to how we build, obviously agents under that to deliver those. It also lets you turn it into a metric, because if you can't measure it, you're not going to be able to measure success at all. And we found that to work very well and basically paint the picture for our customers of what's the core high-level outcomes are across the journey, and then you can start filling in the pieces along the way.
I want to bring you back to Anahita now that hopefully her mic is working.
Yes, I believe this one is working. Okay. We were talking about how do we measure ROI, and I mentioned that ultimately you want to measure the impact on the bottom line, but it's very difficult because when you make an improvement in one of your workflows, measuring what gets you there to ultimately to the bottom line takes time, right? So companies are using a variety of leading indicators, whether it started with adoption and token consumption, which was certainly not a good use of, ROI, token maxing, as Surajit suggested. But now it's more and more we are seeing measurements of the length of workflow. Has it gotten shorter? I'll give you an example. One of the agents that we built, for example, shortened our quarterly reporting from 2 weeks to 48 hours, or our earnings prep from weeks of work to just a couple of hours of work, or customer preparations from weeks to minutes. So that's how we are starting to measure productivity at the workflow level. But I expect as more and more we get to full automation and full workflow transformation, we should be able to see full impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, I think another key part of getting ROI out of AI is simply actually getting AI into production. And Adarsh, in your talk, you mentioned how most enterprises are actually failing in getting AI off the ground. Gartner says that 50% of Gen AI projects fail. In your experience, Adarsh, why is that? Is it a technology challenge? Is it the technology is not good enough? Or do you see it as an organizational adoption where this technology is so new, organizations are still figuring out how to actually deploy this?
Yes, I would say there's a couple of things. So the first one is just the actual confidence in the fact that the AI is performing the way you want it to. And our thesis there is just that most of these enterprises don't have robust evaluations that are agentic, meaning they have the task, the trajectory, the context, the artifact, and the verifier across all of it to make sure that you actually know the agent is doing what you want it to before it hits any production context. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for AI adoption to be successful, you just can't hurl software over the fence. It needs to come with change management, cultural changes, all of these different things. So it's actually a little bit involved, which is why you're seeing a lot of the labs spin up their own deploy codes with these FDEs and partners with these consultants and all of this sort of stuff, because doing a business transformation when your whole culture is not AI forward, not technology forward, is really, really hard. And I anticipate that more of those involved end-to-end full-stack deployment efforts will increase the amount of AI adoption and successful pilots.
And Surjit, how about you? What's been your experience when you're talking to enterprises when it comes to actually helping them get AI off the ground?
Absolutely. So giving a real example, one of our customers, they have around 250,000 employees worldwide across 65 countries, and they implemented our AI employees for the entire hire to retire cycle process, like sourcing, recruiting, onboarding an employee, all of their IT need, ITSM type things, payroll questions, and also actually managing payrolls and so on. So AI employees taking actions, answering questions across around 70-odd use cases. And we did this over a course of 3 or 4 months for them. The impact, and this came from top down. So the impact is actually real. So from 1,000 employees, they had around 1,000 people in their HR ops team. They cut it down to almost 500 people. Okay. From 5 days to resolve an employee question to like 5 seconds or 10 seconds to average to resolve an employee question. So real, actual productivity gain, real employee kind of happiness gain. So they see a 20% increase in employee satisfaction for all issues related to kind of employee issues, employee questions, and so forth. So I think this it kind of shows that if there is a will, it can happen, but it required, as others say, a lot of change management. The biggest change management was training their employees to kind of adopt to the new systems, new processes, rather than go back to the old systems. A very quick, funny anecdote, 30% of the queries the employees would do, and this is their CHRO told me, and this is companies called Wipro, they're a global professional services company, 30% request, the employees actually ask a human again, even though AI agents already answered or resolved the issue, resolved the ticket. So they were very curious, what is the issue? So they did some survey and focus groups. Apparently, employees didn't trust agents can actually do it. So they wanted a human to confirm, again, that this was correct. So over time, there's a lot of education involved in educating the employees to kind of adopt an agentic solution.
Yeah, I love that you brought up this question of trust. Do the users trust the AI? And there's also this question, should enterprises trust AI? Ra, I mean, you talked about this in your talk. What do you make of the security challenges? Do you think AI is actually trustworthy today? Is it trustworthy, but we're still winning over, enterprises are still convincing themselves that AI should be trusted and figuring out how to deploy AI securely? Would love to hear your thoughts there.
I definitely see it trustworthy. At the same time, trust but verify. Right? Coding became amazing because you're able to verify programmatically, or maybe even deploy another agent to verify. So the solutions where you're able to do this, both generate as well as verify, is where we are seeing accelerated adoption. I'll use a different example, sales. One of my customers, his focus is, I want my sales team just selling. Everything that they do before and everything that they do after, I want to be able to automate with agents. He's able to trust the AI to do the right research, to summarize the meeting prep, and use our notebook LM to create a podcast so that they can listen on their drive to the customer site. Right? So simplify all of that, and you're just having the conversation well prepared, have that conversation, and then post that, you're able to update the meeting, CRM, whatever you need to do. When there are solutions in place that can help you verify, we're able to trust much more. And it is also about the people's own journey in how they get to that stage of, this is providing enough value so I can take some risk here and I'll trust this content and then go with it.
Duncan, does that match up with your experience running security within HubSpot? How have the rough edges, how have you experienced the rough edges of AI, and how do you make sure that you're deploying AI securely for your enterprise customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to it. Like on the one hand, models sophisticated as they are just weights and code. So like, you know, everything we've done for a long time around trust and safety and security, like those practices all apply, including things like understanding that different outcomes require different levels of trust and how we watch out for that, if you will, along the way. I think it's also interesting, though, that whilst we can take these frameworks that we've had and leverage them, you know, in the LLM world, on the other hand, a bunch of the conversation we've had here is all roads lead back to high-quality evals. And I think, and I 100% think that is true. The challenge that I think is underestimated is unlike a lot of other change management or previous tech transformations, even like the cloud or mobile, we were really coming up with a different way of doing things or accessing things that was very easy to grok. Like you could wrap your head around what it was. And I think that's much harder with this transformation. And so if you take evals, that's not just the new version of QA and test coverage. Like there's a skill around being able to write good evals, what a good high-quality golden sets look like. And so Mercor obviously does a ton of great work in this space. But that's a whole skill that people need to learn in order to be successful. And figuring out how we get people through that change, I think, is critical.
Yeah, I think evals is a great example, and actually leads into our next question, and I can open this up to the panel more broadly. I mean, besides evals, what are you seeing working for enterprises who are successfully deploying AI? Is there a specific use case? Is there a specific model architecture, one model, many models? Would love just to hear from y'all experience. What are you seeing as some of the early signs of success and what it takes to succeed with AI in the enterprise?
I can take it, unless you're... where we see most success today, a couple of areas. Of course, customer support, employee experience, employee support, which is kind of two sides of it, kind of support. We see a lot of examples of finance operations today, invoice processing, AP, AR, and data extraction, like basically document-related, document-heavy use cases, any document-heavy use cases. I'm expecting the surface area kind of continuously expand over time, right? So, and we are seeing that once we get into a large enterprise, they will ask for kind of more help in adjacent areas. In terms of architecture, everyone is realizing depending on a single model is not the way to go, because the models are kind of getting better. There's a war of attrition on models, and I think the model layer is going to be commoditized, and open source models are getting better. So for us, for example, we use MR Fusion, which blends 100+ models, all frontier models, many open source models, and customers can take advantage of that. But I think that it's some kind of model fusion is becoming standard architecture choice. Of course, I'll let others comment on other pieces.
Anahita, do you want to speak to that?
Maybe I can add to that a little bit. So broadly, we're seeing it across multiple functions, across enterprises. As Surajit said, customer support is a very highly well-defined workflow that we have seen a lot of automation on that. Finance, similarly, well-defined workflows, especially quarter close, month close, all of those are like well-defined processes that needs to be followed, highly automatable. And we have seen a lot in go-to-market teams, sales, because they're the drivers of revenue. When you increase efficiency there, you increase your top line. Marketing, because they're huge budgets we are talking about, and then customer support and finance, as I mentioned, because those are like highly automatable solutions. But we're seeing it across different industries, across different verticals, and across different functions. Maybe one thing I'll also bring back on that trust question that you said. When we talk about trust, there are two elements that we primarily focus on. One is, can you trust that the data is accurate? And it's accuracy, basically. So for example, if I ask an agent, what was my Q1 revenue, there's only one correct answer. And this is not a trivial solution to a non-deterministic technology by nature. So putting the right guardrails and the right evals and the right definitions in place to ensure that you always get that accurate answer and that you can trust this is highly important for enterprise AI adoption. Because ultimately, if you want every employee to use these agents as opposed to humans, to get basic questions answered, you need to make sure that there is accuracy there 100% of the time. The other option is dashboards, which by default have that level of accuracy. The second one is governance. How do you ensure, especially for data agents, how do you ensure that the right people can have access to the right data and not beyond that? All right, when you're opening up access to your financial data across the organization, to your employee compensation data, to your performance data, how do you make sure that each sales account executive only gets access to the portion of revenue that they are supposed to see? How do you ensure that each manager sees the data for their own employees but not their peers? So those are the two elements that we focus on that I believe is non-negotiable for enterprise AI adoption.
Rao, you guys are probably working with some of the largest organizations in the world. What's the Google perspective? Where are you seeing some of the early takeoff with AI and any commonalities of success within your enterprise customers?
Yeah, it's a lot to do with the employee productivity, really stemming from finding the right information at the right time for what you're trying to do. Surfacing information is one thing, and then taking the action. What's the benefit policy on something to actually completing that action to enroll for it, right? So we are able to automate those extensively with the Gemini Enterprise product. And on the other extreme, CIOs are going deep. I use the sales team example, where they're able to automate every single task that a specific role is doing, and they're able to deliver that exceptionally well. Now, they're actually measuring sales productivity. Are they able to have more conversations, and are they able to close more deals faster? So aside from the usual employee delight and those kind of factors as well. So we're seeing it across the employee productivity as well as actual delivering business ROI.
So Anahita, I want to bring it back to something you said. Actually, it'll be a question for Adarsh, given what he was talking about earlier. But let's talk about data, and let's particularly talk about sovereign AI. Should enterprises keep their data? Should they share their data with frontier model providers? Should enterprises run their own models? I mean, the Palantir CEO recently argued that AI model companies, they pose a threat to most enterprises. Is that an overplayed geopolitical angle, or do you think sovereign AI actually matters to enterprises? I mean, Adarsh, you mentioned earlier how you guys are going to the enterprises, you help enterprises unlock using AI with their data. What do you view of sovereign AI? Do you think, when you look across the data layer, the model layer, confidential compute layer, what do you think it's okay for enterprises to share versus what should stay behind their firewall?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of moving parts to the question, but the first thing, which is how are enterprises going to harness their own data to make these model deployments work? I very much subscribe to the school of thought that every enterprise is definitionally idiosyncratic, right? Like even for two companies in the same space, McKinsey and Bain, like each of them have their own processes that make them special. And if they were exactly one-to-one the same, then neither of them would exist, right? There would only be one entity that subsumes both of them. So I think the implication for a lot of AI adoption and deployment is that the hardest part is encoding a lot of that unique secret sauce of the company, which is the workflows, processes, and organizational context, into the actual model weights or the harness. And it can be something as sophisticated as a way that an insurance company does underwriting, or we all know that like AI agents can review resumes, but you can't just deploy an agent to do that unless the agent knows what is the talent philosophy of that company, how do hiring managers of that company screen for resumes and stuff like that. So that, in general, the challenge of encoding the company's specific context and intelligence into the model, into the agent, I believe is very, very challenging to get right and the most important thing for these deployments to go well. Now, on the second point, which is about the sovereign AI, like what data is okay to share and so on and so forth, we work with a bunch of companies who are sharing what we call commodity workflows with the AI labs. So a lot of the AI labs are looking to just see how well the models can actually, like just improve model capability in real enterprise context. So for example, an IT function, right? Like if you want to make the agent really good at traversing all of the different parts of your IT stack, we can help anonymize the data, do the identity scrubbing, put it in an RL environment that's useful to the labs for training, and that's like typically a no-cost option for the average company because we can generate on the order of magnitude of 7 or 8 figures for them by monetizing their data very, very effectively. Now, the last thing, which is on the open weights stuff, I think there are going to be a bunch of use cases for private models. I think there's going to be a bunch of use cases for open source models because it hits the price performance curve a lot better. And the only way to figure out which one is right is evals.
So I'd love to get the model provider view on this. Rao, you
yeah.
are one of those model providers, not to put you on the spot,
yeah.
But do you think the Palantir CEO is correct? I mean, should enterprises be sharing their data with Google and other model providers? Yeah. Can they trust you all that you'll use the data in the right way and won't compete with them?
Yeah, you can absolutely trust Google. So building on what others were saying, right? So there is the enterprise data, but depends on whether you can give that data to the agent. It doesn't always need to be in the model, right? So you can give it in prompts, you can give it in context. I view it as the best context is the smallest context that gets the job done, right? So you actually can do a lot of things in a sovereign environment using a frontier model. You have all of that control. And obviously, the enterprise agreements that we have, we don't see the customer's data. So as an enterprise, that's sacrosanct for us as well. Frontier models will continue to improve. And then customers understanding the cost, performance, and latency. And we always try to be the best on the Pareto chart. the customers do and will use a variety of models, and we try to provide all the flavors for it. You have the Gemini Pro, Flash, and Flashlight to find the right use case for the right model. That's on how enterprises can keep their data and still use frontier models. Coming back to the open source models, what that is doing today is it's eliminating the cost of training for an enterprise. But the cost of inference is still a cost. Especially compared to a CPU and the newer workloads, you still have a much higher marginal cost when you're actually running the model. So as an enterprise, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to invest in that CapEx? Am I willing to invest in the people and the capabilities to grow that over time? Right? So there are multiple elements here to deal with when you're thinking open source does not solve everything. So you want to also think about the business aspects and the organizational expertise when you think about, am I doing it on my own?
So I love that you brought up open source again, and Surajit mentioned it earlier. So to close the panel out, I'd love to dive into this question on open versus closed. If you follow X, it seems like open source has won the hearts and minds of everybody on X. Is that what you're seeing within the enterprise? Do enterprises care about open versus closed? If you think about 5 years from now, who's going to win the model battle within the enterprise? Is it going to be open? Is it going to be closed? Is it going to be both? Maybe Duncan, you can start us off, given you've actually built and deployed AI systems. What's your view on open versus closed? What are you using internally, and do you think enterprise customers care about either?
I think at the end of the day, what enterprise customers care about is trust and reliability. And it's all about how do you solve for trust and reliability. And that probably means you don't want to have any single point of failure in the critical path if you think of it as an engineering system, like even as a business system. Yeah. So I think driving the right outcomes, which are going to be that balance of cost and performance and reliability and so forth. And there won't be a single thing that is the right one for any of those. So I think we'll absolutely continue to see a mix of those, and we'll get more sophisticated about the tooling that we use to be able to bring those to bear. And again, make sure we've got reliability without any single point of failure anywhere in the chain.
And Anahita, I'd love to get your view, because I know Snowflake has their own open models. You work with frontier model providers. What do you think the future of AI in the enterprise looks like?
We work with both, and I'd say the future is probably a combination of both. What we are seeing today is like frontier models so far has been, the more innovative models. They're a bit ahead of everybody else. They're pushing the boundaries of technology and innovation forward. Open source models give you better cost, brings more competition and increases innovation as a result of that, and gives you better auditability and visibility into what's happening under the hood. And I think for different workflows, you probably need different one of these models, right? Like if you're just simply summarizing an email, you probably don't need the most advanced reasoning model. Whereas there may be certain tasks for which you actually want the most advanced reasoning model. And so I'd say the future is really providing both of them to the customers and helping them dynamically route the queries to the right model. And that's what we're doing at Snowflake, providing that flexibility to the customers to optimize at the query level for the right model that they want to use for that specific use case.
And Surajit, I'm going to let you close it out, because you mentioned open source models. You said you think 40–50% of your internal work is open source. What's your view on where open source is headed versus frontier?
I agree with Anahita. I think the question is about, the strategic question is, can you change your model? It's not open source versus closed source. And if you change your model, do you need to change your entire stack? Will it break apart, fall apart? Do you need to code everything again? To build correctly, you should build in a way that you can change your model, or you have some kind of a model blender, model selector underneath your agentic orchestrator, so it can take advantage of all the innovations that are happening in the model world without kind of waiting for kind of retraining your entire agentic layer. That's, I think, will be the kind of the core architecture going forward, however you implement it.
Well, thank you, esteemed panelists. I learned a ton, and I'm really excited to have a deep conversation today within this great campus about enterprise AI. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, we are running a bit behind, so we're going to power through onto the next session. And it's my privilege to introduce our next two presenters who are going to be doing a fireside chat. So it's my pleasure because I've had the opportunity to work with Ali and Andy for over a decade now, since NEA first backed Databricks back at the Series B back in 2014. So I'd love to introduce both of our next speakers. First off, Ali is a CEO and co-founder of Databricks. He's responsible for the growth and international expansion of the company. He previously served as a VP of Engineering and Product Management before taking the role of CEO in January 2016. In addition to his work at Databricks, Ali also serves as an adjunct professor here at UC Berkeley, and he's on the board at the UC Berkeley's RISE Lab. Ali was one of the creators of the open source project Apache Spark, and his ideas from his he does research in areas such as resource management and scheduling and data caching, which have been applied to Apache Mesos and Apache Hadoop. Ali received his MBA from Mid-Sweden University in 2003 and his PhD from KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, in 2006 in the area of distributed computing. His co-founder, Andy Kowinski, is also the co-founder of LOD as well as Perplexity. His work spans research and real-world impact in artificial intelligence, data, and software infrastructure. He got his PhD in computer science, also from UC Berkeley, where he contributed to Apache Hadoop and co-created Apache Mesos and Apache Spark. He also co-teaches the PhD seminar on research to startups here at Berkeley. Join me in welcoming both of these amazing speakers and founders to the stage.
Okay, this is fun. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to this summit. Ali, should we kick it off with telling some stories about Databricks, early days, or Berkeley?
Or even Berkeley earlier,
yeah.
Whatever.
UK, okay, so you and I go back to 2009, 2010? 2009. You got to Berkeley, and there was an email going out. I think it started with Jan or Scott Schenker sending this email to the Mesos group that's like, here's this visitor. He's going to be joining the team. And Matei and Ben and I were like, oh, who's this Ali guy? And we were very insecure and who was going to be first author still. So we were like, and then he comes in and he's jacked. And we're like, oh, okay. I hope we don't have to arm wrestle for this first author. So that was some of my formative memories of you being injected into our research project. And then you went on to do dominant resource fairness, DRF paper, and just become like a mentor and then basically one of my co-advisors. So that's what I remember.
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Yeah, I remember a lot of fun stories. It was amazing years. 2009, 10, 11, 12 was kind of, UC Berkeley was at the frontier of all these new algorithms for the new computer. The new computer was the data center. And we were doing all this amazing research. And I remember, there was a lot of skepticism around, AI, machine learning at the time we called it, and data centers and all of that. So yeah, it was best years for me, most formative years. My favorite memory is probably when we had started Databricks. And actually, there was this big debate. Should we run the company out of Berkeley or should we run it out of San Francisco? And half of the founders wanted to move the company to San Francisco, and half of us wanted to keep it here in Berkeley. And I remember we brought in do you remember this?
I do, yeah. I think I was on the Berkeley side.
Yes, I was on the Berkeley side too. And then you, I think, called the mayor of Berkeley.
Yeah, first I think we met with the chancellor.
Yes.
And then he said, you should talk to the mayor, and he introduced us. And so we
Yes.
hooked up with the mayor and brought him into our office,
Yes.
which was not a very nice office.
Yes.
Because Berkeley doesn't have great office space.
And he brought a lot of people with him. I think it was like, us as a researcher, I was like, oh, these are all politicians. And they came in and they sat there and we pitched them on algorithms, advanced algorithms for scheduling. And I think the mayor just fell asleep and just dozed out through the whole talk. And then woke up at the end and came up to me and shook our hands.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, and then he said, I hope that one day I will have a data brick in every home. Still hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. I mean, maybe NVIDIA's most recent rack, the one?
Exactly.
Could be where we go someday. So those days when we were here at Berkeley, they were the most formative for me too, and there was something magic happening in the air or the water. What do you think it was, and do you think that it's still here? Has it changed since then?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Berkeley still. Yeah, I think actually the city is special, and I think the university is special. Actually, before I came to Berkeley, I did a bunch of postdocs. I actually lived like more or less in 9 different countries and visited 9 universities and lived like in different places of the world. And I think Berkeley and UC Berkeley specifically is very special. And the thing that's special about UC Berkeley is that there's this kind of attitude that you can change anything, you can question anything. I mean, academia has that in general, but UC Berkeley especially has that. And I think it was kind of a little bit of a culture shock for me when I came to the research group. Because the kind of things we were working on, I was like, oh, that's not research. We're not supposed to do that. And we're like, no, we're doing it. It's cool. It will have impact. I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. This is like you're cheating here or something. It's like, no, we can do anything. Like, this is like, we're just here to change the world. So I think that's the kind of spirit of Berkeley. And I think that's, university has it, but the city has it, and its history, and, and I think that's what makes it special. And sometimes it goes a little bit extreme. Like, I think, but there's, research that has super high impact, and then there's some research that, is further out. Like, I remember there was like research on delay-tolerant networks. And it was like, oh, but, obviously the internet is broken if we want to do interplanetary communication. And we have to redesign a new internet for interplanetary communication, because eventually we're going to colonize all of the universe. So that was one of the research projects here in networking. So, I think it's like the aperture is really wide, and it helps people to kind of broaden that. And
yeah, I know that in the early days, we were operating systems and distributed systems research group, and we took deep inspiration from BSD. And I remember we went through a couple of naming iterations with what became Mesos in the end. And one of the contenders I put forward was the Berkeley Cloud Distribution, BCD, or Berkeley Cluster Distribution, named as inspired by BSD, Berkeley Systems
BDAS, Berkeley Distribution of something.
No. There was BDAS, which Mike,
was badass.
Yeah, badass. That was like the official nomenclature. Yeah. You have to pronounce it badass, the badass stack. But no, this was what I put forward for the name of Mesos. I said we should call it BCD.
Yes.
And I don't know, you guys, I guess you might not remember. Matei, I'm pretty sure Matei and Ben both said, no, like, who are we to, like, be so lofty as to name ourselves, like, only one edit distance from BSD? And I was like, well, we're gonna, like, build the more impactful operating system is who we are. So yeah, I did not win that vote. I think Mesos was pretty good. So
that's the Berkeley spirit.
Yeah.
Question the norms.
That's continued at Databricks. We most recently announced, or we announce many things every week, but Omnigent is a big open source framework trying to play at the harness, or that is putting forward a new kind of router for harnesses is how to think of one way to think of it. Also, we talk about open evals, which we can talk more about later. So how has that played forward from your perspective as the leader of Databricks for so long now, seeing that what we carried from Berkeley in terms of open innovation and that maybe sky's the limit mentality still carrying into Databricks strategy?
Yeah, I think open for us has been always super important. So we always want to open source standards, open source interfaces, because it creates communities. And those communities become very powerful. Actually, Databricks would not have existed as a company if there wasn't for the Spark ecosystem, because the Spark ecosystem just was way bigger than anything any of us would have done. So it's both good for the community, it's good for the world, but it's also a good business idea as well, as Databricks has proven out. So we just continue doing that. And we do it in things that we think are the most useful and will have the biggest impact. So a bunch of years ago, we did MLflow. And MLflow, actually, people don't know, but it's 40 million downloads still a month, every month. So billions of downloads a year. And what was that? It was like in the ML era, machine learning era. So say 10 years ago, people were obsessed by the best models, but it was just very hard for machine learning people to iterate on the different models. So they needed sort of a Git version control, kind of a way to be able to iterate and keep track of all the different experiments. So that was MLflow. Omnigent, which you just mentioned recently, that came from, there's just so many harnesses out there. And unlike large language models, people switch between them quickly. They're stochastic. Every time you ask them a question, they give you a different answer. And we can see it in the Databricks data, because we serve all the different models. We serve actually proprietary models and open source models. So we have like data on all of that. And we see that people quickly switch between them. So when there's a new proprietary model or a new open source model, people quickly, within days, are moving to it. We've never seen anything like it. Anything else in software is sticky. You stick with it, and there's a decay, and people slowly churn and migrate, but it takes a while. You don't just instantaneously, everybody just flip-flop. With LLMs, that is the case. But what we saw with harnesses was that people are building harnesses on top of them, and the harnesses are kind of like old software in that they lock you in, and you get used to the interface and the memory and key sort of shortcuts and all of that. So we wanted to create something that lets you actually switch between these and have it be completely open. And the idea was a meta harness, so harness of harnesses. So it will work with your Cloud Code, it will work with your codecs, it will work with any actually of them, OpenCode, Pi, you name it. So that way you can get the multiplexing, you get the community, and the project has we just launched it this summer, and I think just in the first couple of weeks we had 1,000 forks on GitHub. So it's really taken off, and over hundreds of people contributed immediately within weeks. We're very excited, and I think we're going to continue putting out open source projects like this. I think open sources actually have a huge boon in the next bunch of years, thanks to vibe coding or AI, because before it was like, okay, it takes huge amount of effort for a Linus Torvalds to build a whole operating system and compete with, say, Windows. And at some point, someone has to pay his salary, so they get hired by companies and so on. But today, since the cost of writing software is going down, I actually think it's going to be much more palatable, and we're going to see many, many more open source projects out there that become standards.
I have a theory. It's not really here nor there, but it feels like we're going to get a GitHub version where instead of pull requests containing code, they're going to just contain the prompts, and then the PR reviewers will decide, run those prompts. And I think we're moving towards that in things like OpenClaw and probably Spark, in that the work on the committers is now much more about deciding how much of the code was written by a human, or how deeply, how many hours did a human spend on this pull request. I don't know, it gets me thinking about all the big the big ways that the world you and I grew up in and we started Databricks in is fundamentally going to be different going forward. Any reflections on kind of the paradigm shifts as they play out for Databricks, or I don't know, the future of software dev and vibe coding?
Yeah, I do think we're going more and more towards, if you can specify what the program should do, and you kind of have the testing foundation and harnesses, then the implementation actually doesn't matter. The AI can figure out the fastest, the best implementation of it. And you might be rewriting it many, many times. But it really requires you to have this really sort of airtight way of specifying the code, and I think it's moving that way.
Yeah, that reminds me of evals. So we at Databricks recently announced this effort where we internally scraped a bunch of our own coding issues and tasks. We built a data set, very large data set. How many? Over 1,000?
Yeah, it's a huge data set of, because we have about 4,000 engineers that are writing code every day, and so and the whole company, about 11,000 people, are submitting questions like data science questions. They want to know how the business is doing. They're working in the field, so we took all of that.
And that's basically a declarative spec. You've declaratively put into these questions and answers, I assume.
Yeah.
That people ask the question, you have the Databricks answer, and now you've got this specification for a thing that an agent could come and learn to answer. Here's a bunch of questions we wish our agents could answer. That's a bespoke evaluation, our benchmark to Databricks. And do you think that other enterprise or tech companies, or just wider enterprise companies, are doing this? And I actually have a lot of opinions about evals, so we can dive into this.
Yeah, I just think that there's so much contamination happening. So we wanted to just have this, ground truth. There's every day there's something released. So we wanted to ask the ground truth for us. Which model should we use, and can we just use GLM 5.2? Is it going to be as good, or is it not, and so on. So that's what we kind of set out to do. That in general, the frontier labs are so obsessed with superintelligence and the march towards superintelligence that many of the things that we want to do every day are not kind of part of their evals. So they're focused on HLE, humanities last exam, and HLE has these very complicated math questions and physics questions. But when we actually looked at very basic tasks that we wanted to do every day, they weren't actually doing so well on it. Actually, on the hardest ones, they were getting 40% right. 20% right. And then on the average ones, maybe 40% right. And these are basic questions. Here is 1940s budget of United States. Just get us what was the spend on defense spending. So it needs to kind of scan the PDF and figure out how they presented things in the 40s and do that. And yeah, it's turns out that's really hard. Because the focus has been on physics and math. things that you can RL like that, not these mundane enterprise or business tasks. So we came up with this eval that we call Office QA, from Office, the movie, TPS report. So we thought, like, let's just solve that. So we were focused on that. And with that, we were able to basically build an agent that could do the PDF parsing and do those kind of things and get close to 80% correctness on it. So I think evals in general and specs are going to be extremely important going forward. You've yourself launched a bunch of these things. Terminal Bench was started by Laud.
Yep, yeah, so we teamed up with a professor at Stanford, Ludwig Schmidt, whose group had done big stuff like Clip and this data comp set of projects, which was big in evals and data. Basically, data comp that Ludwig had done before was where you fixed, instead of changing the model and then holding the data set fixed, you hold the model fixed and the agent, and you change the data set and have a leaderboard for that to see how by changing data sets can you improve the results for one fixed agent. So Ludwig was a big innovator in benchmarks and at Stanford, and I met up with him at NeurIPS, and actually that was the NeurIPS where we launched this thing called the Kaminsky Prize, which was...
K-Prize.
Yeah, the K-Prize, yeah.
Get $1 million.
Yeah, get $1 million
Andy, right?
from me. I'll write you the check.
Yeah.
I tweeted it on stage at NeurIPS, this like promise that I'd write $1 million check to the first team who got 90% on a thing that we called SweBench contamination free. And that was basically, you have software engineers write their agent code on some test set, which is just, we scraped new GitHub issues. And we said, here are these issues that were from popular repos like PyTorch or Spark or something. Your agent has to fix these. Normally, agents people can train their agents on the test set if the test set's published. So you can do two things. You can keep this test set secret, or you can say that you're not going to scrape the test set until after all the tests are the submissions have been placed. So that's what we did. You basically made a cutoff date by which people had to submit their agent code, and then we scraped new GitHub issues for the 4 months after that, and then ran the evaluations on the agents that had been submitted, and the results were, I guess, around 10% success rate, which is really good for new benchmarks. And coming off of that launch, and then talking to Ludwig about his...
Isn't it crazy that like everything is 90% saturated, but like when you do a new one, it's like 10%?
Yeah, and it starts this cycle, and this is a new thing we're working on too, that we just announced a couple weeks ago. It starts this, what I think of a very inefficient cycle of every benchmark, you mostly throw away the last benchmark and start over from scratch. And it turns out that we did Terminal Bench 1, and then 2, and then 2.1. And from 2 to 2.1, we were mostly like fixing 5 to 10 tasks that people had discovered were essentially unsolvable. But a lot of benchmarks don't even do those little minor version releases where they update the task, they update all these broken tasks. And so there was this culture of, this shadow culture. People who knew Terminal Bench 2 really well knew that like 83% was actually 100% because there were these unsolvable tasks. And you don't want that if you're a benchmark maker. You want 100 to be achievable, but just be really hard.
Yeah.
So we did 2.1, and that gave us this idea that, hey, benchmarks, the way we're doing them right now is really stupid. It's this like fame race and a hamster wheel where you do 2.1 and then, we did 2.1. People don't even usually do minor versions, but then you do 3, and Terminal Bench 3 would have a whole new set of tasks with almost no overlap with Terminal Bench 2. And instead, we should write benchmarks like software, which is you don't throw away the code base every time you do a new version of Spark. You like just make changes to the code base. You fix bugs, and you, in terms of benchmarks, you delete the old tasks that are saturated. Like now, everybody gets these right, so don't keep them in the benchmark anymore, and add 10 new tasks that are even harder. And so it's a much healthier thing because you're releasing your benchmarks every 2 or 3 weeks.
So it's like updating all the time.
Yeah, like software.
And it's like software. And that makes a lot of sense.
And you're fixing bugs.
Yeah. Actually, what I like about that is like there's this Goodhart's law, which is whatever metric you use to evaluate something ceases to serve its purpose because it gets gamed. So this is perfect. This basically makes sure that your benchmark does, because that's actually what's happening. That's why everything is 90% everywhere.
Right, and so you can gently steer it too, because as the frontier evolves, we discover that like right now, reward hacking it's like part of the major frontier. Nobody was talking about reward hacking. Very few people were talking about reward hacking a year ago. Now a lot of people are thinking hard. New tooling's getting built around it. The agents are getting better at identifying it, and we want more tasks that are robust to reward hacking, or tasks that explicitly test for an agent's resilience to reward hacking. So we can do that in a week or two, is like come up with 3 new tasks, cut a new version of the benchmark. So Terminal Bench 3 on will be like 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 really fast, and very relatively small iterative updates. So pretty excited about that. I do believe that benchmarks are changing dramatically, and I actually believe deeply in what you said, that the agent and the harness code is going to be kind of optimized automatically more and more if you have good evals. And so that's a pretty big change from the early days like laying chain or laying graph or these other frameworks where you have humans thinking hard about a good way to architect your agent. Now instead you have your humans spending all their brain power coming up with the evaluation. How do you accurately capture like the distribution of hard things inside your company or your government, whatever you're trying to optimize, and then you unleash these optimizers, either code optimizers or prompt optimizers or model weight optimizers or all of the above to just hill climb those evals. So those two trends together are where we're thinking about with the Harbor open source team a ton right now at Laud.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, you with the Open Frontier is an initiative that you guys are spending a lot of money basically helping open research, open science. Is that going to have a chance against these frontier closed labs that are huge salaries, and then there's very secretive and there's no published results, versus this open frontier that you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for speaking at the meeting a month ago. We assembled about 100 of the top researchers in AI that are still doing open science, and we talked about the fate of science as we know it. And one of the observations is that many of the top minds are leaving academia to go get paid, go from their $400,000, $300,000 salaries to $10, $50, $100 million salaries, go from having a lab that gets 10 to 50 million in funding to a lab that has billions and billions, hundreds of billions in funding. And those two key things, the access to resources and the access to what is now competitive salaries, which is pretty insane for when we started Databricks even 10 years ago. I think just insane, just in absolute terms across the planet, that people are having billion-dollar comp packages right now. Those are the reasons that I feel really worried about science as we've known it. And I believe that innovation is necessary right now to create a new institutional dynamics that augment academia and also create a proof of concept for the ways that we can give researchers enough resources to continue doing research at the frontier. So yeah, I guess explicitly to your question of can they compete head on? No, like we will never have a nonprofit where a combination of philanthropy and the US government, which is how nonprofit research gets funded, including this university we're sitting at right now, where they will be able to raise the hundreds of billions at the same level as an Anthropic or an OpenAI. But they do need to raise at least one order of magnitude, maybe between 1 and 2 orders of magnitude more than they are. And that's just a new shape of fundraising, and probably a new way of having labs team up that they never really have had to in academia. So maybe thinking about like a lab of labs architecture. How do you have more collaboration somewhere between the way that academic labs currently collaborate, which is mostly via reading each other's papers and building off of ideas, and the labs that are in Meta or OpenAI and Anthropic, which are centrally run, all laser focused on one single stack and one model. So somewhere in between that is like a looser but still aligned collaboration of many labs that are doing evaluations like Harbor, or pre-training like Marin, the project at Stanford led by Percy Liang, or agentic frameworks like Graham Newbig does at CMU, or prompt optimization and context optimization like Matej Zaharia here, or Omar Khattab at Berkeley and MIT. So you have faculty at all the top labs, plus independent researchers doing nonprofits right now is blowing up, like not at the level of Anthropic, but like a 5 or 12 person team, just not even NeoLab, like actual nonprofit, not a for-profit. And if you can find a way to get to kind of herd those cats and get, first of all their faces on one slide, then I think it will, and then second of all, actually operationalize that, which is what we're working hard on doing now. Like, how often do you meet? How do you agree on artifacts? How do you get the models that Marin is producing, or collaborating with the labs who are putting open weight models like Thinking Machines or Reflections claims to be working on an open model and to be releasing one eventually soon. So how do you team up with these folks and get sort of the sum is greater than the parts in a nonprofit? That's what Open Frontier is, and there's actually like a kind of big burst of momentum and energy. We've been talking about it for like a year, and now Satya Nadella tweeted about like the need for this sort of thing, and Databricks is like showing the way for the possibility of this open ecosystem actually standing a chance, and so I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah, super excited about it.
How much time? 1 minute left? 1.5. OK, so we should talk about undergrads, because we're sitting here at UC Berkeley. We both taught undergrads here and mentored them and brought some of them along with us to Databricks. You still pay hundreds of engineers to do software engineering to build frontier infrastructure. Is it hopeless to come to Berkeley? I gave the commencement speech here, and a lot of students are super worried, and their families came up to me afterwards and were like, we're confused. What should we do? So is there hope? Like, should everybody just be bailing on computer science?
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't know why this is happening. I think at the frontier labs in particular, there's this kind of sentiment that there's only 2 more years of work left, and then everybody's going to be out of job. And programming is going to go away. You meet more and more people that feel that way, especially in SF, I think. I don't know if that was also going on in Berkeley or not, but yeah, no, I think this is completely wrong. I think the AI transformation will actually take decades to go through. And it's just because it takes a long time to change society. Like, it took from 1880 to 1920, when the electric engine came about, and it replaced the steam engine, before you could really reap the benefits in society. And actually, it took from 1880 to 1920 before they saw any impact on GDP. And it's not like, OK, that was a physical thing, it was hard. No, electric engine already existed in the 1840s, 1850s. So it just takes a long time. Same thing with the PC revolution. It took a long time. And I'm at Databricks, and we have AI now, and we're trying to identify everything we're doing at the organization. And just see how hard it is that you have so many tasks that have been built up over the last, for us, we've only been existing for 13 years. Some organizations out there have been around 10, 50, 100 years. It takes a very long time to change everything you're doing. So I think that this agentic revolution will take a decade at least, if not more. And there's lots of new good ideas. Like, my favorite example is internet already existed by 2000, but it took Brian at Airbnb till 2009. So it took 10 years after internet, or even longer, for him to come up with that idea and that to take off. But the internet was already there. People had houses that they could rent. There was no physical infrastructure needed. It just takes a long time to come up with good ideas and get them to percolate and disseminate through society. So I think that there's most of the interesting things that are going to happen haven't happened yet. There's going to be amazing companies, amazing ideas, amazing research that's going to be created in the future. Just as a couple ones that I always like bringing up, like I think there's going to be a healthcare company, and it's going to probably be worth trillions of dollars. And that healthcare company is going to be a healthcare company where you can get a doctor that has seen billions of patients, and it can give you personalized healthcare. People would be willing to pay anything for that, right? If you could help the health of you and your loved ones. Or education. Education is like super important to people. Historically, VCs have always said, oh, there's no money to be made in education. But I actually think, if you look at the United States, elections are won and lost based on education. And people care about the education they give their kids. And this technology is transformative when it comes to education. So we're going to see innovation there as well, both by universities, maybe nonprofits, but also by companies. And you could see people want to, if that's the best way to train your kids, I think we're going to see that. So there's so many ideas. And I can't believe, this is the best time ever. I wish I was born so that would have come out now when I'm like 20, 25 now, and start working on, this is the best time if you want to transform the world. If you came out 10, 20 years ago, things were more kind of smooth. This big transformation is like the best time to be alive and be part of it. So I think computer science has, far to go, and I think we're going to see way more software being written in the future than we've seen in the past. So I'm super optimistic.
Yeah, I'm very parallelly optimistic. I work with PhDs still at Laud in partnership with the labs at Berkeley, Stanford, MIT, and the other top universities. And if you find the students who ship something, like they launch an open source project, or tweet one of their papers or something, and they get a large response to it, they still feel that, and you talk to that student, those students are really motivated by impact, the way we were back with in the Patterson labs, thinking about BSD and the way that we could change the world. And I talked to them about why they would be saying no to these $2 or $5 or $10 million a year comp packages where they can go kind of disappear into one of the closed labs where they're going to do frontier research and shape the way that Claude works, but they won't be able to talk about it. And it's for the same reason still that those people, they get that getting to work on the problem you see as the visionary one and a commitment to disseminating that to like the whole world is more impactful in the end, even than the proxy that this $10 million or $50 million check represents. That's also representing impact, but it's kind of a lagging indicator. So I think it's inspiring to me to see that these students still identify with the kind of core thing, which is this is the best time in the history of our species to be a person who wants to build something that people use and work at the frontier of AI.
That's a good way of putting it. Like, yes, you can make a lot of money at the frontier lab, but you'll never, ever have the chance to have as much impact also. Because this is just during this transformation, you could do things where assumptions are changing, new ideas can flourish. This is the time to do that, so you should think about that as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. I think we're well out of time, so thanks for the chat. This was fun.
Likewise. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.